the wisdom. So we have, even right there...
What's his name?
This is an emergency transmission from FEMA Region 6 in occupied North America.
There is a war. It's happening now. It will decide the fate of humanity. The time to choose sides has come. We are the Resistance. We are the Infowars. All right, a few weeks ago, we got contacted by a very interesting individual, John DiBartola, who heads up the MiddleEarthNetwork.com. I know it's very popular. And I've read Lord of the Rings. I like it. I like the whole allegory. And I've read some of the writings and interviews, there's not a lot of them, with J.R.R. Tolkien, saying that no, indeed, growing up in South Africa and then being a linguist and archetypal historian on European cultures, and of course, I think it was in World War I, wasn't it? Or was it World War II? That it was World War I, that it was an allegory to a lot of the way politics and the world really worked. He was obviously a really smart guy. I've forgotten quite a bit of it, read the lore of it a lot of years ago, but clearly that's why it's powerful. And then I was sent some of the quotes that haven't been released yet, but I guess when we do an article about it, we can break some of this down. So some of this is quotes by Tolkien. They're remastering the audio recorded in the 50s right now. We do have some never-before-heard clips today, and then hopefully in the next few weeks we can release the really juicy clip. The cold-hearted wizards, in their quest for knowledge and power, were only good at destroying things. In his final salute to the assembly of hobbit lovers, Tolkien said that Sauron is gone, but the descendants of the hateful Shire-polluting wizard Saruman are everywhere. The hobbits of the world have no magic weapons left to fight them. We have that quote. But he adds with a robust and hopeful declaration, and yet, the gentle hobbits, may I conclude by giving you a toast, the hobbits, and they may outlast all the wizards. Tolkien never again attended anything like this in his honor. So a pretty reclusive guy, and most of the audio and things have been sat on by the family, which is fine, that's the family. But this is an interesting little giblet for Tolkienites out there. I wouldn't call myself one of those, but I find it interesting. I like a lot of literature, both fiction and nonfiction, certainly well written. And I wouldn't call myself a crazed fan of it, but I like it. The big thing is it can reach out to the hundreds of millions of Tolkien fans out there, and it's very exciting. So I'm glad that we're going to be able to break some of this down. We have our guest on Skype. We're going to get him back here in a moment and talk to him a little bit about it, and we have some of that audio that we're going to play here today. But just always interesting, the type of stuff that comes through this radio broadcast. And my association with occasionally talking about the allegory of the New World Order, the all-seeing eye of the Illuminati, the all-seeing eye on the dollar bill, the New World Order, led us to Viggo Mortensen, who's a listener of the show and came on and is a frequent listener. And the guy that plays Gimli, he's been on. He's a listener. What's his name? Famous actor. He's been on the show through that. And so, John, I appreciate you coming on the broadcast. John DiBartola, thank you so much. This is a brief segment, long segment coming up, and I guess you're there smoking your Hobbit pipe right now. So tell us about how you came along into this, and when we're going to get to hear the whole really cool final speech he gave.
Right. Well, thank you, Alex. Thank you for bringing me on. It's a great honor to be on here today. I really love that you played the Conan the Barbarian theme before the segment here, and it made me get my sword in hand to wage war on the orcs today. So, once again, thank you. I really appreciate you.
That was a Texan came up with Conan, a champion boxer, and then his mother died, so he committed suicide. Who was that? Robert E. Howard, I think.
Robert E. Howard. Very good. Yes, absolutely, a Texan. So yeah, the tape. Really, it's a miraculous story how this all came to be.
Stay there. We're just whetting their appetite. This is a really exciting story, folks, because the full interview, I mean, Tolkien was against the New World Order. I think it's clear. John DiBartola is our guest at MiddleEarthNetwork.com, one of the most successful literary fiction franchises of all time. It's up in the top 3 or 4 on record, one of the biggest movie franchises of all time. The Lord of the Rings, the Hobbits, the world of Middle-earth. And when you study politics and the power behind the throne, the all-seeing eye of the Illuminati, clear archetypes. So it was probably 15 years ago. I started reading some of the books that had fragments of the Tolkien interviews and things where he did liken it to World War I, World War II, different powers, the way political systems work, tyranny versus liberty. And you could clearly see that he knew a lot as a top linguist and more. But our guest has done a lot of studying, helped ferret out folks that had this rare interview that's going to be doled out, I guess, over the next few months. We're going to air a first little clip here today. But John, break it down again, how you ran into this, and from your deep research, where J.R.R. Tolkien, stands from his political view way back when this was recorded in what year, in 1950?
It was recorded. The public recording was made in 1958 at what was called a Hobbit's dinner. This was the first time. What's amazing about this tape too, it's so many firsts. This is the first time that Tolkien went out of the country for a quote unquote fan dinner like this. So it's a first in many ways, and it's a complete recording from beginning to end. So out on the internet, you'll find like fragmentary recordings of Tolkien and interviews, but never have we heard him before in a natural setting where he's able to deliver a speech from beginning to end. So that's what really makes this tape unique. But my friend Renee van Rossenberg from Holland, and this all happened really through the Tolkien Society, the British Tolkien Society. We're all friends together. And Renee van Rossenberg was doing research for a white paper he was going to deliver at a celebration at the Tolkien Society. He knew about this speech that Tolkien had delivered at this Hobbit's dinner in 1958 in Rotterdam. So he went to Rotterdam to research the speech. And in his research, interviewing people that were still surviving, that were at the dinner, he came across the family of the man who actually, this was a hobbyist, a tape hobbyist. Remember, this is 1958. Reel to reel is fairly new. So this guy would record all the speeches at these events. And the family said, oh, we've got this tape. You can have it. So as a Tolkien fan, Renee was literally beside himself. He didn't know what was going to be on the tape. Brings the tape back, plays it, and nearly falls on the floor because you've got this entire speech from J.R.R. Tolkien. And in the speech, like I said before, we're hearing Tolkien like we've never heard it before. He's emotional, he's jovial, he's joking, but at the same time, he's very serious. He's talking about the direct meaning of the Lord of the Rings in a way that we've never heard him say before, even in his letters, in such a definitive way. And there's just priceless quotes. Well,
I would call myself a novice Tolkien fan, not like somebody who's really had the time to get into it deeply, but I've resonated with it. You obviously have done a lot of research into this, heading up one of the big societies out there that's been very successful at digging out a lot of lore. Tell us a little bit about this really interesting man, because the more I've read about him, he was really an interesting person.
Well, like you said earlier in the introduction, he fought in the trench warfare of World War I. Most of his friends, his school friends, his college friends, I think only one of his friends made it through World War I, and he himself was sick in the war, but he survived through. And obviously, the trench warfare had an immense and great effect on Tolkien himself. Now, he wasn't writing direct allegory, and you'll hear many scholars say this, and Tolkien himself said it very many times, that he was not a great fan of direct allegory. He would like the themes to be taken up in the story himself. Someone like his friend C.S. Lewis was very interested in direct allegory.
This was an indirect allegory. It's not like the screw tape letters that's direct.
Right. He would call it applicability. He would say what he was writing, you could make it very applicable. Specifically, the ring. The ring would be a symbol for power. And if you read through his letters, and I would highly recommend anybody who's interested in not only the Lord of the Rings and the fantasy stuff, but just Tolkien as a man and a lot of maybe his politics and his beliefs, to read his letters, because most of his letters have been published in full. And I brought a bunch of quotes from him today. One of my favorite quotes from him, and I think this will really appeal to you and your fan base, is his summation of evil in the world. Okay, and this is back in 1969. He talks about what he calls the Hydra's heads, and I'll read the quote verbatim from him. He says, "The spirit of wickedness in high places is now so powerful and so many-headed in its incarnations, there seems nothing more to do personally than to refuse to worship any of the Hydra's heads. The world, he thought, seemed little better than a new Tower of Babel, all noise and confusion. So even back in 1969 and way before that, in the 30s and the 40s, he was writing about the level of corruption that had reached what he would call, quote unquote, the central planners.
And he just described the New World Order so eloquently.
Right. Right, exactly. And I think I've heard you say before, these people who he would call whiskered men with bombs, they're playing multi-level chess, right? And the public is barely playing checkers.
Yeah.
Right. The level of corruption at many levels is that many-headed Hydra.
Listen, I've had billionaires and globalists literally up in the top of big buildings, just like Gandalf going in to talk to Saruman, literally say you must join with the New World Order. I mean, and that's why I went and saw the movie. I'm like, I remember reading that book 20 years ago, and it's like, that's really how they act. I've been given that speech. And so I guess Tolkien, as a high-level professor and others, he'd run into that, surely. I mean, they're literally selling you on how evil's the way to go. And so, he says it's not direct allegory, and I'm not comparing myself to Gandalf. I'm just saying that's the speech they give you, is that, I am Saruman of many colors. Well, you have to have a balance. Join with Lucifer. Join with the Great Eye. The power of Isengard is now at your command.
Right, exactly. And, I think the disconnect for the average person is the average person, they see a person with a nice suit on, and they cannot ever even fathom that person might actually be evil. There's a great disconnect in modern society, and that's why Tolkien is so brilliant, because he shows in a fantasy novel how deep evil can go, and it can affect the smallest person as well as the highest person in the world.
And let me ask you a question. Who came up with the battle armor of Sauron that was in the film that came out over a decade ago, and then in the new one when he walks out of the flame interdimensionally at that fortress when he defeats Gandalf? I know it's described in the book, but not that way. Who came up with that battle armor?
Well, that would probably be one of the set designers or the armor designers. There was a lot of great armor and weapons designers working on the film.
Well, no, it's just that archetypally, in a lot of Illuminati research I did, that's one of the highest level initiations. That's how Lucifer is described when he manifests.
Right. Well, there's definitely a great similarity between the what I would call these Sauronic characters in Tolkien's legendary.
Well, no, there's a god, and then there's these higher angels. Sauron's one of those. He defects, tries to destroy the creation in rebellion. It is a Christian allegory, is it not?
Right. Yeah, well, when you go deeper into the mythology and read the Silmarillion, which the Silmarillion is the back legends, the history, so to speak, that lays behind the Lord of the Rings and the Hobbit, it's actually Morgoth or Melkor who is the satanic figure behind Sauron. So Sauron is not the ultimate evil figure in the mythology. It's actually Melkor who is controlling things from behind the scenes.
Well, that's right. Doesn't Melkor fall to Earth and gets destroyed, and then out of it, it's kind of a reincarnation as Sauron?
Right, exactly. Melkor is chained behind the door of night, and then the angels, the higher powers, they give him pardon and let him out again. And he wreaks havoc. He's not redeemable. There's no repentance for Morgoth. He's an absolutely true evil character, and that's what's so brilliant about Tolkien. He represents evil in such a pure and well-described way.
And notice, just like the cell phones really track everybody, they give us the technology, but with the back doors in it, they're giving us all the tech, but it's ruled by the One Ring. I mean, he's telling you how the wizards run everything in the allegory.
Exactly, and Tolkien himself was extremely frightened and discouraged, really, at the level that machinery itself was taking over the world.
He predicted little computer gadgets would dehumanize us. Talk about that.
Absolutely. As a matter of fact, another great quote from his letters, and again, I would highly recommend everyone, you, Alex Jones, go and read Tolkien's letters. It's an absolute lesson in this whole area. There's a quote where he talks about the war of the machines that has already begun. It made me think of Terminator when I read this quote, the war of the machines, and he says, well, the First War of the Machines seems to be drawing to its final inconclusive chapter. Speaking about World War II, leaving alas everyone the poorer, many bereaved or maimed, millions dead, and only one thing triumphant: the machines. As the servants of the machine are becoming a privileged class, the machines are going to be enormously more powerful. What's their next move? So, I mean, he's personifying the machine.
Tolkien was a total visionary.
Total visionary, and that's part of my mission, and the Middle Earth Network's mission is to make people see that it just wasn't about the story of the Lord of the Rings. Now, a lot of this is tied up in the story of the Lord of the Rings, but this was a brilliant man, and the Middle Earth Network is also one of the co-founders of the Mythgard Institute, which is the very first online college allowing a master's degree in what we call Tolkien studies, studying all the peripheral stuff that Tolkien himself loved and studied, and enriching people.
Wow. Well, you're a great interview. I want to have you back for a full hour soon. This is amazing.
Absolutely.
I'm glad you contacted us. I want to play one of these clips, and I know you're saying it has to be remastered because it's like listening to LBJ tapes from the 60s. They're can loop sound.
Yeah, exactly. And that's part of me coming on here today, is to let people know about this tape, and that we're on a mission to get this thing restored. I consider it a miracle that it even came to us. See, the thing about the Middle Earth Network is we're a fan group. We're a collection of fans. We're a collection of people who love J.R.R. Tolkien. And I thank God that this tape came to us and not some big corporation or maybe even a private investor who would have just bought it and buried it from the world, because this is a really important message.
Well, listen, I know nothing about this compared to you, but what I've picked up trying to find out about Tolkien over the years is so much of his stuff has been held and sat on. Is that gut level analysis correct, or is it wrong?
A lot of it has been sat on. Who knows how much is actually out there? I mean, this tape was virtually unknown until my friend Renee discovered it in the early 90s, and he kept it just because he's just such an avid collector and wasn't really even sure what to do with it. And really, it came to us through a mutual friend, a beautiful Tolkien artist, Jay Johnstone, brought it to our attention, and really, they were happy to release it through us, a fan group, because they knew we would really respect and be good stewards and wardens of the tape itself and not do it in an overly commercial way.
We're going to play this clip. Now, how long is the total speech, and when are we going to get to hear the whole thing?
Total speech is approximately 20 minutes long. Right now, we are in the process of restoring the tape. We have done one level of restoration. We got it as a WAV file originally. So Renee still has the reel-to-reel, the physical reel-to-reel. But we actually do have a notification that the BBC is very interested in restoring the actual reel-to-reel. And that is kind of like a forensic process that they have to go through, baking the tape and all this stuff. So
Sure, because for those that don't know, I mean, if you don't, it literally has static. It has a looping sound,
right.
and we were able with a computer just today to take some of the background hiss out of this particular clip. And then when we come back from break, I want you to tell us some quotes, if you can, of some of the other stuff in context. But describe this first virgin airing of a short clip of him talking about the wizards manipulating society.
Absolutely. He saw the wizards really as the masters of the machine, and the machine to him was about coercive power, right? Changing the natural world, changing natural abilities, and to coerce whole populations with power. And that's why he makes reference to the wizards the way he does in this quote. And I'm actually going to set up the clip with a little bit that precedes the actual clip we're going to play, so it makes a little bit more sense. He says towards the end of this 20-minute speech that he delivered to the Hobbits dinner, he says, 20 years have flowed away down the long river, but never in my life will return from the sea. Ah, years in which looking far away, I saw ages long past, when still trees bloomed free in a wide country. Alas, for now all begins to wither in the breath of cold-hearted wizards. To know things, they break them, and their stern lordship they establish through the fear of death. And that's the preceding quote right before the clip we're going to play.
I mean, that is like poetry on the Illuminati, on the New World Order.
To me, it's prophetic, really. Tolkien would probably laugh at my summation of that, but to me, it's just to be writing this stuff in the 30s, 40s, and 50s. To me is just amazing. We're just talking about this stuff now.
Let's go ahead and roll the clip. Here it is.
I look west and west. I look north and south, and I do not see a Sauron. But I see very many descendants of Saruman. And I think we hobbits now will have no magic weapons against it. And yet, here, gentle hobbits, may I conclude by giving you this toast. To the hobbits, and may they outlast all the wizards.
Well, I can't wait to hear the whole 20-minute speech and the parts that precede it and the parts that come, of course, in front of it. What did he say after he finished the quote?
Right, that was it. That was the final toast that he gives, and then the introducer, the host of the dinner, closes out, and we do have that recorded as well. The closing comments of the host.
Well, that part really, introing, it's even more powerful. That's just amazing. I look east and west, and I look north and south, and I do not see a Sauron, but I see very many descendants of Saruman, and I think we hobbits now have no magic weapons against him, and yet, dear gentle hobbits, may I conclude by giving you a toast to the hobbits, and may they outlast all the wizards. And the point is, the simple, good people that are just as smart as the wizards, but don't want to dominate and control. Simply amazing. We're going to come back. We're going to come back with a final segment with you, and then get you back in the future when more clips come out for a full hour. But certainly, in context with his other published stuff and the transcript of what you just read previously, it's clear he was a visionary. J.R.R. Tolkien. And again, I always read a few quotes of Tolkien, read his books. I think I read the Silmarillion. In fact, I know I did back in college. And I'm like, man, this guy really knew about how the world worked. But he never stated it outright. He did it kind of the oblique allegories. But now we've got somebody on who's really researched it and brought up amazing quotes I've never heard and played that clip. But I can't wait to get the remastered previous clip to his final toast. That was extremely powerful. John, any other little tidbits you'd like to throw out there to the audience?
Yeah, I'd like to actually have a direct reply from Tolkien himself to your statement of allegory. I think this is really cool. Speaking about the ring, it's almost as if he was in the conversation with us. He says, you can make the ring an allegory of our own time if you like. An allegory of the inevitable fate that awaits all attempts to defeat evil power by power. But that is only because all magical power or mechanical does always so work. So again, just absolutely brilliant summation of the corrupting power of the machine.
If the Soviets are staging terror attacks to mobilize their people, you can't stage terror attacks on America to mobilize our people. It always turns to evil. You can't do evil things and have it turn into something good. It always comes back to bite you in the butt. And wisdom knows that. Cold-blooded wizard knowledge would tell them they can get away with it.
Exactly. And if I can, I'd like to read another quote. The news today about atomic bombs, this is right after the Hiroshima thing or right before Hiroshima. The news today about atomic bombs is so horrifying, one is stunned. The utter folly of these lunatic physicists to do such work for war purposes, calmly plotting the destruction of the world. Such explosives in men's hands while their moral and their intellectual status is declining is about as useful as giving out firearms to all inmates of a prison and then saying, hope this will ensure peace. But one good thing may arise out of it, I suppose, if the write-ups are not overheated. Japan might cave in. We're all in God's hands now, but he does not look kindly on the Babel builders.
Wow.
Yeah, and that's why I try to motivate people to read Tolkien's letters, because literally almost every letter is chock full of quotes like this. Just an absolutely brilliant man. I personally, as a Tolkien fan, love his letters almost as much as I do his fiction.
Well, I was about to say I'm a fan, but I'm really a fan now. I mean, I've read some of those letters online. Where do you find all the letters? I guess they sell books of them, or?
Yeah, you could buy the published letters of J.R.R. Tolkien. There was a recently updated version a few years ago, and there's hundreds of letters published, many that are still unpublished and show up once in a while through private collectors. But I would highly recommend, it's called The Letters of J.R.R. Tolkien. I would highly recommend any fans or non-fans, you want to get into Tolkien, start with the letters. It's just a wonderful way, as well as joining groups like the Tolkien Society. You can go to tolkiensociety.org or the Middle Earth Network. We have a great group of people. We host a lot of artists. That's another thing I wanted to mention is independent culture. I remember you had an interview with Viggo Mortensen. One of my favorite interviews that you did was Viggo Mortensen, and he talked a lot about what he called independent culture. And that's one of the ways
we have to make our own art outside of their paradigm like Tolkien did. Amazing, sir. I'm impressed. Thank you so much. Look forward to having you back on soon. Nightly News Tonight, 7. I'll be back tomorrow, Lord willing. Great job to the crew. Nico and all the folks getting this together. Love the sword, brother. That's a great interview. That guy's awesome. I want him back on. All right. In January of this year, I sent Jakari Jackson and other Infowars.com reporters to the west coast of the United States to investigate the reports of massive radiation spikes, 10 times in some cases what the background radiation is supposed to be. Professional groups, private organizations, and citizens alike were going out with their field meters and Geiger counters and picking up huge spikes in San Francisco, Los Angeles, but as far north as Seattle. Jakari and our reporters not only confirmed increased radiation, they found it all over the western coastline.
Why is this not a national news story? Why is this not an international news story that these power plants are registering lower radiation than what is being found in Half Moon Bay?
We had witnessed a coordinated cover-up by Tokyo Electric and the Japanese government of the cancers and deaths and thyroid ailments plaguing Japan in the first 3 years after the disaster. So the question was, is there a cover-up going on in the United States and North America as a whole? Turns out the EPA, within just a few months of the Fukushima disaster, with the trade winds and currents coming right into the United States, had indeed raised the levels of what they claimed was safe for the population. In some cases, more than 1,000 times what they had previously claimed was safe. So we continued to investigate and noticed that just a few months after Fukushima, tuna had been caught off the coast of the United States with higher levels of radiation. Buried in reports that got little or no attention, we began to discover massive deformities in whales and other sea life, seal die-offs, starfish die-offs, massive fish die-offs. And when our reporters went and tested the fish that were being caught off the coast of California, the radiation levels spiked dramatically.
It's almost double.
There's a reason I sent my reporters to the West Coast. It's to draw attention to the fact that the nuclear industries in the United States and worldwide are out of control. More than 75% of reactors in North America are currently leaking. In the past, every one of these leaks would have been a huge issue. Now, it's as if radiation is good for us. In fact, Ann Coulter and others have come out and said that we should be thankful for the radiation. The Japanese should be thankful because, after all, it's good for them.
Radiation in excess of what the government says are the minimum amounts you should be exposed to are actually good for you and reduce cases of cancer.
Tell that to all the valiant rescue workers who tried to secure the damaged plant who've now succumbed from radiation sickness and died. And tell that to the sailors and crew of the USS Ronald Reagan, many of which are dead and dying now from radiation poisoning. And the VA will not give them any care and basically puts them on a death panel list to wait and die.
Our sources tell us many were placed on a secret list designed by VA managers to hide the fact veterans were waiting months to see a doctor.
Bottom line, it is important that we draw attention to the fact that this industry is out of control. And we also draw attention to the fact that the federal government itself is ordering millions and millions of dosages of potassium iodide for federal workers while telling the general population that, oh, you don't need to have that unless you live right next door to a nuclear power plant.
They're acting like they're preparing for some sort of nuclear emergency right now, because we now know that the Department of Health and Human Services, for example, they just ordered an unprecedented 14 million doses of potassium iodide, which, you know, protects the body in the event of radioactive poisoning. So the federal government, they are already acting as if there's been a severe nuclear accident. Does that concern you as much as it does me?
Oh, yes, it concerns me not only as a journalist, but as a just general citizen.
The truth is, radiation is an invisible poison that's all around us, and the levels of it are going up. It was in my research to find ways to try to shield my family or mitigate the dangers of increased radiation that I discovered that iodine was a key component and that the government was hoarding it. But the type of iodine they're hoarding is something you only take during a huge disaster, not something that you take on a daily basis that from the research helps your glands and body overall to be healthier. That's why we developed with Dr. Edward Group Survival Shield, a proprietary new form of nascent iodine. Survival Shield has been incredibly popular because of the results people have gotten, but also because it's more palatable and easier for children to take. It's not as harsh as some of the other iodines that are out there. We innovated with Survival Shield Nascent Iodine, and it's still available and is excellent. But we are now very excited to introduce X2. There is no other iodine anywhere near this. The other so-called nascent iodines are black and turn black on paper. The Survival Shield Nascent Iodine turns electric blue purple because it's from the pure crystal. You can literally see these ancient crystals seething with the iodine. If you think Survival Shield was powerful, X2 is the next level. Take the Infowars challenge. Regardless, you're getting high quality iodine that on record the government admits everyone needs. It's essential, and you're supporting the very tip of the spear in revolutionary pro-liberty media. X2 from InfoWarsLife.com or call toll-free 888-253-3139. There's no other iodine like it on Earth.